Mhm.
Well, thank you for pulling this all together here, Christina. Should we start off by, as we're waiting for people to enter the room, with our trivia questions?
Yes, that's fantastic, Erin. Yes.
Okay, so uh, folks should let us know what they think about the answer to this trivia question. What is the most common Christmas tree purchased in Iowa? What is the most common Christmas tree purchased in Iowa? And the choices we have are the Douglas fir, um, the Douglas fir, the balsam fir, the Bruce spruce, or the Scotch pine, or the white pine. Kaylin, any guesses you want to share with us before we get started?
The white pine?
Okay, that's your guess. We'll reveal the answer in just a moment. And an additional trivia question asks, how many Christmas trees are produced in Iowa? How many Christmas trees are produced in
Are there multiple choices for this one?
Iowa? There should be, but I didn't put them in.
You have to help narrow it down for people just a little, Erin.
Okay, let's go 7,000, 17,000, 27,000, 37,000, or 47,000. 7,000, 17,000, 27,000, 37,000, or 47,000. Okay. Well, people can put their guesses into the chat and we'll reveal the answer in just a little bit. Okay. So, Christina, I'll just wait for your go ahead before we get started.
Yes, yeah, I see some guesses coming in. Christine Curry says, dittoed Michaelyn's answer. Kay Carrick says Bruce Spruce. Christine has guessed 27,000. Chris Henning has guessed 37,000. Okay, so there's more guesses coming in. And so as we get started, I want to remind people that our next Lunch and Learn will be in 2025. We won't see each other again in 2024, but in 2025, January 2nd, we will be joined by Matt Russell, Executive Director of the USDA Farm Service Agency in Iowa. We love it when Matt joins us. He has joined us before, and he will be talking about marketing assistance for specialty crops. And the deadline to apply for that, right, Erin, is January 8th. So he'll join us on the 2nd. He'll talk about that with the deadline to apply for that program being January 8th. I will put the link to register in the chat, but you will also get emails about it. Erin, you want to go ahead with our other announcements?
I will. And we are a couple other Farmers Union announcements I want to make sure people are aware of. We have a couple of dates that we want to remind people about. The Iowa Food System Coalition has a lobby day scheduled for January 23rd. So go ahead and put that on your calendar. More details will be coming about the Iowa Food System Coalition Lobby Day in Des Moines, January 23rd. The Iowa Farmers Union has our annual water lobby day, and that is scheduled for February 18th. February 18th is the Iowa Farmers Union Lobby Day. We'll be getting more information out to you soon about that and all the legislative efforts going on with the Iowa Farmers Union. I also wanted to remind people that the Iowa Farmers Union is now in our 40,040 days fundraising campaign. The Iowa Farmers Union has a very generous, kind, and giving membership. And this end of year giving program allows us to do extended outreach, extended organizing, and extended education efforts with our members and with the general public. Your gifts make all of that possible to make our advocating on behalf of family farmers and sustainable agriculture and thriving rural communities. All of that's possible through your membership and your giving. So if you have a chance, please go to the link and give. If you've already given, thank you so much. We are well on our way to our goal, and we want to continue to build on that momentum now through the end of the year. So that does it for our Farmers Union announcements. I wanted to say a special thank you to Michaelyn Mankel for joining us today. Thank you, Michaelyn.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Michaelyn is an organizer for Food and Water Watch based in Des Moines. She got her start as an activist, fighting Line 5 and joining the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led movement fighting for the Green New Deal. But now her role is focused on halting the rise of factory farm pollution, which is fueling Iowa's water crisis. And she has agreed to be with us today to share a recent report that really puts this problem into very severe focus. And we are very grateful that Michaelyn could join us today. So welcome, Michaelyn. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much. Yeah. So we did just release this quantitative research memo on looking at the last decade of agriculture spills in the state of Iowa. The impetus behind this report, for anyone that lives here, we know that it's rare to go a month without a severe ecological event caused by the agriculture industry, which is not super surprising. We know a majority of Iowa's land is privately owned and used for agricultural production. But we wanted to take a look at the last decade to show the ways in which this problem is creating a statewide crisis, and to demonstrate the scale of that crisis. Because with these events happening so frequently, it can be really hard to wrap your head around what kind of impact and damage this is causing in our state. The results were pretty damning. We looked at 179 violations in the last 10 years, which amounts to more than a spill a week. And we also looked at what these violators were being charged. It amounted over those 10 years to $635,000. 171 of the 179 violators were charged by the DNR. And that amount was also we also looked at what restitution was paid for the more excessive spills. There are sometimes additional amounts, but overall it was less than $100,000. And while that might sound like a lot, we know that that's in reality a slap on the wrist for these companies and corporations that are generating massive profits here in Iowa. And it is also a very small amount compared to what Iowans are paying annually to clean up our water, which is somewhere in the range of 66 million. I'll go ahead and share my screen to take a look at the map. So this is the end of our research memo, and I'll drop that in the chat when I'm done sharing my screen. But here is the map. All of these red dots represent spills over the last 10 years, and these 10 yellow dots represent repeat offenders. And as you can see from the map, what this data really shows is that nowhere in Iowa is safe from the pollution from the ag industry, and nowhere is safe from these spills. These 10 multiple time violators also demonstrate what we already knew, that the fines that the DNR is leveraging against these corporations does not cause them to change the way that they're doing business. Instead, we have an agency and political leadership that has rolled back regulations on this industry and paved the way for them to amass large profits and conduct their business recklessly at the expense of our health, at the expense of our environment, at the expense of our quality of life. And that also speaks to, looking at that annual cost that Iowans are paying to clean up our water. that is just looking at what we are paying as taxpayers. It does not speak to what we are paying as individuals when we are taken ill, when we are diagnosed with cancer or a host of other medical conditions that are linked to the pollution coming from the agricultural industry. And this map is also overlaid with our Factory Farm Nation 2024 report, which looks at the ag census data. And there's a lot of correlation between where factory farms are concentrated and where we're seeing the most spills. I think that kind of summarizes the memo itself and this map that we put out. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and drop the link to the memo in the chat and open it up for questions.
Sure, we'll encourage people to put their questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. You mentioned that the map you showed was a 10-year composite, right, of spills, and all around the state. Remind us that the total amount that was accumulated in fines over that time.
Yeah, the DNR charged 171 offenders, a total of $635,000 over the last decade. With the restitution amounts, it was somewhere in the range of $800,000. I think it was 835, but yeah, and that's the cumulative sum of what these violators have paid.
Okay, very good. And we'll get to it. We'll ask folks to put their questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can. So this is kind of an aggregate of all the violations that we've seen in the state. Michaelyn, if people want to learn more about specific incidences, how do they find out more information? I assume that they might go to the state of Iowa, to the DNR for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is something that was really challenging with putting together this research, is the fact that, one, the DNR doesn't have a lot of comprehensive data on these spills. There were some records that talked about where the spill happened, but not the amount of manure, it didn't always list who the operator was. And there was, an incomplete set of data that we had to comb through and, cross-reference media and other kinds of information that exist to put together this fuller picture. And another thing we found was that the DNR itself was not responsible for determining that a violation was happening. Oftentimes it was everyday Iowans who were noticing and calling in and reporting on these spills. So while they are doing some work to regulate, it is not a proactive effort by the DNR, but rather after the fact, after an accident has already happened, they will sometimes step in and, do their job. So the DNR is a good source, the only source, really, the only agency that's tracking this. And our report has a lot of references on where that data was found.
Sure. We had a question that asks about the number of violators, and certainly this is what's been gone through the DNR process. How likely is it that the actual number of spills is reflected here? How about unreported spills? Do we have any clue about how many of spills go unreported?
It's really hard to say, but it is definitely our belief that this is not a full record of all of the spills that have happened in our state, particularly because of what I was just addressing, that the DNR is not moving around the state and checking in on these operations, but it's really Iowans who are alerting the DNR after the spill has already happened. And we know that rural Iowa has been, in a lot of ways, hollowed out by this industry. And there's, a declining population in the counties where these confinements are most concentrated. So unless the spill is traveling downstream and impacting more populated areas, it would go unreported. So, well, I don't have a concrete answer about how many spills might have been missed. We'd say that it's very likely.
Sure. There are a couple of larger, that kind of goes to a couple other questions that are coming in about this issue. Um, from your perspective and from Food and Water Watch's perspective, does the DNR have adequate staff to enforce regulations?
We would say no.
Mhm.
From this set of data that we were looking at, it was oftentimes a single person that was responsible for responding to a reported spill, documenting it, and proposing the fine for the operator. And that's a lot of work for one person. We also know that the political leadership in our state has been incredibly friendly to this industry and has really balked at any regulation and set the tone and set the culture at the DNR to be incredibly friendly with corporate agriculture. So I don't have the figure for the annual budget at the DNR or the number of staff that they have working there, but we know that it isn't staffed or funded to the extent that it would need to be to really regulate agriculture operations and protect our natural resources, like our water quality, our air quality, and that kind of thing.
Well, very good. The larger perspective, we have folks who are just need a little more clarification. Where does the EPA fit into into these regulations? Maybe you could remind us the relationship between the Iowa DNR and the EPA and the role that Iowa DNR plays in regulation that's as it relates to federal regulation.
Yeah. So each state has an agency, most often called a DNR or similarly titled agency, that is approved by the EPA to uphold regulation of, bedrock legislation like the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act. Food and Water Watch was part of an effort to petition the EPA to revoke that title or permission from the DNR all the way back in the early 2000s. And that petition process resulted in, some minor changes at the EPA or the minor changes at the DNR and an audit, a statewide audit that went on for several years. And ultimately the EPA determined that the DNR is capable of maintaining its, regulatory status. And we know that that's, not the case, that they are not upholding regulation the way that we would need in order to have clean and safe drinking water here in our state. But that's kind of a parallel. We have also been fighting at the federal level for the EPA to revoke Big Ag's free pass to pollute and end this practice that started with a loophole that the industry found, a decade after the Clean Water Act was passed, that removed agriculture from the set of industries that are regulated under the Federal Clean Water Act. That's something that we're continuing to fight both on the federal and state level. So while, the EPA on the federal level is in some ways appears stronger on a lot of issues, we know that both at the federal and state level, there is a free pass to pollute given to the agriculture industry, and we really need to end that.
Yeah, in addition to that, Michaelyn, we have a question that asks, is there an effort going on in Iowa to train citizens on how to monitor and report spills? What can we do to put ordinary citizens to work on this issue who can get involved when they see a spill happening or want to report issues to the proper authorities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know of any training programs that are run statewide, but I know each county or many counties has they just changed the name. They were previously watershed management authorities, and the state legislature decided to change that name because even the title of authority was threatening. And these groups exist in every county and around every watershed. And it's like, I know that they do a lot of work in analyzing and reporting on what the state of the watershed is. I would imagine that they would have some good resources for folks that are interested in doing citizen-led monitoring initiatives. But at Food and Water Watch, we're really pushing for folks to get involved in the political fight, because we know that the state of environmental degradation and the consequent public health crisis that we're experiencing, these things are a policy choice, and it is something that our political leadership needs to be held accountable for, and it's also something that they could change.
Absolutely. So we're getting a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to them all today, Michaelyn, but thank you for sharing with us. We have a question that asks if we have a spill that's happening at different facilities, but they have common ownership. Are they treated differently from a perspective, an enforcement perspective?
Yes, and that is something that the industry has gotten really good at, opening up several smaller facilities that are geographically very close, but registered or filed under different LLCs. And we didn't make an effort to backtrack and try to follow the money and see if there was a larger trend of repeat offenders that hold multiple different facilities. The 10 repeat offenders were all, coming from the same sources. But could you repeat the question, actually?
Well, it's asking if two different facilities have similar ownership or connected ownership, does the enforcement reflect that as a multiple violator as opposed to individual violators?
It does not. And really, the enforcement doesn't treat repeat offenders as repeat offenders, even when it's just one facility, one ownership that is, responsible for multiple spills over a set of years. It doesn't increase or levy greater fines if an operator has produced multiple violations. It's treated as an isolated incident every time.
Right. And a related question asks, we know that the industry is dominated by a few players that have vertical integration, right? They own the pigs from the top, but they distribute their production sometimes through contract production. Is there any way to hold integrators responsible, those who control the industry from the top on down, for the spills that are occurring with their production?
Unfortunately, at this time, I really don't think so. We know that that is one of the most predatory elements of this industry, that operators or integrators like Tyson and other massive conglomerates have found a way to put the burden and risk on everyday Iowans for the most expensive and labor intensive and time consuming part of the process, which is raising these animals. All of the burden and risk falls on residents of Iowa. And, there is, even though the integrators are pushing this get bigger, get out model that encourages, a lot of reckless practices, they are never held responsible.
Yeah, it's a top-down problem, isn't it? And all those responsibilities, all those liabilities, all those exposures are left to those at the bottom in our communities. So, well, Michaelyn, our time has really jumped very, very quickly. Remind us where people can access this report and how people can get more involved.
Absolutely. So first, the first link that I just dropped is to our 3-page research memo that outlines a lot of the findings that I discussed on this call. Christina, thank you so much. She just dropped my email address. And if you're interested in learning more or getting involved with Food and Water Watch, please reach out to me. Here also is a link to the GIS map with an overlay of the Factory Farm Nation 2024 report. And finally, I'll drop a link to our day of action at the Capitol, which is just a couple days before Iowa Farmers Union will be there on February 10th.
Excellent. Well, Michaelyn, it's really been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for sharing this valuable information and providing Iowans with an avenue to how to get more involved in bringing more justice to this situation. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, ditto. We really appreciate Iowa Farmers Union for, representing small scale or family-based farms. And we know that protecting and promoting agriculture and a different model of agriculture is just as essential as fighting for regulation of the large corporate establishment that we have here in our state. And we're so glad to join you all today.
Well, very good. Well, thanks again. I'm going to remind people about a couple of items before we wrap up here. We are at the Iowa Farmers Union is in the middle of a fundraising campaign. The generosity of our members and supporters goes a long ways into bringing programming like this and to bringing active action together to address the problems that we're facing with monopoly-based agriculture here in Iowa and promoting family farm agriculture instead. So if you haven't had a chance to give yet, please go to the link and please participate. And for those of you who had already made your commitments, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. I've been reminded that I did not give the answer to the trivia questions, which is a big no-no from my part, that I didn't reveal the answer to the trivia question. We estimate, Iowa State University estimates that we grow 27,000 Christmas trees here in Iowa every year. And the varieties most often purchased are Scotch and white pine Christmas trees, Scotch and white pine Christmas trees here in Iowa. I'm going to also remind people that the Iowa Farmers Union in recent days has put out action alerts about important farm bill developments in Washington, D.C. Very needed improvements to the farm bill, improvements to help farmers who are in economic stress because of natural disasters or market conditions beyond their control. All those things are happening in the continuing resolution being debated by Congress now. So urge your Congress people to take action to support family farmers and to bring conservation dollars into the new farm bill, as well as we seek a one-year extension on the farm bill. So make sure you refer back to those action alerts and take action, because there is pressing things going on in Washington right now. Well, thank you, everyone. Please join us next week. Our guest will be Matt Russell or I'm sorry, not next week. And on January 2nd, we'll be joined by Matt Russell, who is with the Farm Service Agency at USDA, and we'll be talking about an important marketing assistance program for specialty crop producers with a deadline approaching in early January. So join us with a conversation with Good Farmers Union friend, Matt Russell. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Christina, we've covered a lot of business today. Maybe there's something that we need to follow up on?
Yeah, I think that's everything. Michaelyn and I will follow up
Great.
with an email to folks with all these good links and stuff. We'll see everybody in the new year.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a happy holidays.
Thanks,
Travel
everybody.
safely.